There's a very important step in CG production that you may not have heard of, or at least may not know much about. It has a lot of names and falls under the responsibility of various departments, depending on which studio you ask. Sometimes it's called technical animation or tech anim, shot finaling, shot work, or just post work. In the pipeline, it falls somewhere between the animation step and the lighting step, and what it is the process of taking animated or simulated geometry and pushing it further to match art direction when the limitations of those rigs and simulations fail to reach it on their own. Sometimes there's a dedicated tech anim department for cleaning up animation before it even gets to cloth and hair simulation, but usually the cloth and hair simulation department is what handles this, since they're going to end up having to go through this process for cloth and hair anyway. So that's what my newest toolset ANIMPOLISH is for. It's a collection of artist-friendly deformation tools designed for pushing rigs and cloth and hair simulations past their limitations. Now, there are very few studios that give this responsibility to the animators, and I'm not really sure why. I assume it's generally just considered too technical for animators, and yes, it is slightly more technical than setting keys on control curves, but I really don't think it's too much. If you're using an intuitive toolset, which I'd like to think mine is, I see no reason why tools like these wouldn't be a great addition to any animator's tool belt. On the other side, for whatever reason, there are very few quality tools out there for cloth and hair artists to clean up and push their work to a refined level, especially ones that don't require plugins, so I'm looking to fill that gap as well. And as a side note, working in tech anim and cloth and hair simulation, also known as character effects or CFX, it's a pretty unknown and underpopulated corner of the animation and FX industries, and quite frankly, because of that and the relatively light skill requirements, it's not that hard to break into. So if you're maybe into rigging a little bit, but it's just a tad too complicated for you, or if you're an animator who likes to get a little technical, maybe take a look into CFX. Not too much info about it online, but I am hoping to make a tutorial series on the basics sometime soon, so feel free to look forward to that. Okay, so now let's talk about why you need to push animated rigs past their limits in the first place. You might think that a really good rig should be able to hit any pose if the animator is using it correctly, but that's just not how it works. The dirty little secret of rigging is that animators break rigs by pushing them too far all the time at every studio, and usually there's nothing that can be done about it within the rigs themselves, at least not without wasting a lot of extra time on the rigger's behalf and probably overcomplicating the rig too. It makes much more sense to tackle very specific needs on a shot-by-shot basis instead of loading up the rig with thousands of custom corrected poses that would likely end up causing more problems anyway. The same goes for cloth and hair simulation. There's no physical simulation on the planet that can come close to accurately emulating the world's laws without some unpredictability. You're gonna get jitters, bellies popping through shirts, a cape flapping around way too much, and since any simulation is attempting to obey the real laws of physics, the more stylized and cartoony the show you're working on is, the more manual sculpting you're gonna have to layer on top. So now that you understand the basic idea here, let's walk through some of the tools that are included with ANIMPOLISH. I've got another video you can jump to if you want the full walkthrough, but for now I'm just going to quickly demo the basics so you can get a gist for whether or not these tools are for you. So one tool here is for exporting your animations to files where it's just cached geometry without the heavy rigs, so you can work on polishing in real time. That's why in this case you see a bunch of randomized colors instead of Bonnie's textures. Once you start working on polishing, you've got quite a few very simple deformation tools here that you can use to quickly push geometry past the rig's limits, including adding new controls and sculpting custom shapes. First up is the Sticky mod, which lets you throw down a ride-along modifier that can be pulled away from the geo according to a radial falloff. You can use this tool to fix any number of penetrations, or to correct volume loss, bend limbs on rigs that don't have bendy controls, and thanks to being able to control the offset, it's great for stuff like chewing, swallowing, and skin contact, like poking somebody's cheek. Next up is Sculpt Pose, which lets you make custom sculpts and animate them over time. You can use this to make any sort of correction you want, or to push poses with smear frames and stuff like that. It also includes a pose-to-pose mode that will automatically key in and out of any sculpt that you make. With Wrap++, you can lock any geometry to any other piece of geometry with a paintable falloff, or if you prefer, just lock it in place. This and other tools included also allow you to select multiple vertices and then automatically flood all other verts to 0, zero, and run smooth map a couple times to save you some time having to manually paint the map afterwards. Subdue is a weird one. What it does is it bakes all your vertices down to animation curves and rebuilds those curves according to a sample rate that you give it. In other words, if you give it a value of 3, the animation is rebuilt on 3s, 4 is for 4s, and so on and so forth. In short, it softens the overall motion, and if really turned up, gives it an underwater effect. This is extremely useful when you're running a cloth sim and it's just moving around a bit too much and you just want to tone it down. You've also got a few miscellaneous deformers here that give you greater control over the general complexity and placement of parts of the mesh. Grow Shrink will push and pull the geo along the normals, and Iron will smooth them out. There's plenty of other useful tools included with ANIMPOLISH, and I've got a 36-minute video on this channel walking through all of them in depth if you're interested. Either way, head on over to joshsobelrigs.com. You can check out the totally free version, which includes 3 of the most useful tools: Sticky Mod, Sculpt Pose, and Wrap++. And if you like that, grab a copy of the premium version for $18. It has just a ton of stuff I know you'll find useful, whether you're an animator sick of rigs not doing what you want them to, or a cloth and hair artist that's been frustrated with the lack of tools out there for shot finaling. At the very least, I hope this video sheds some light on some misconceptions in the industry, and maybe even let you know about a possible career path you hadn't considered before.